This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Ross Riege, whose work includes what I would argue is the best film of 2023, Weird, the Yankovic Story, and also one of the best shows of the year, The Afterparty Season 2. Among other great projects. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So looking at your IMDb, it seems like you're doing all the fun projects like Rutherford Falls, Weird, like The Afterparty, and they all seem like fun projects to be working on. So how did you get into this community or group that you're working with?
I guess I've been fortunate. I mean, part of that is just, from the get-go, being able to shoot for a living is already kind of a dream come true. So I guess it's just an extension of that, is, when opportunities arise and, trying to find the right people to work with, the right projects. Because I think even in the most difficult situations, it's still easy to remember how fortunate I am and grateful to do what I do, but also it just compounds it when you're working with great people and, the subject matter is great. So yeah, it's been a fun few projects in a row for me, for sure. Working with Chris and Anthony on Afterparty, first time working with them. And, when I had the chance to talk to them about the project, I was super excited to meet them because I've only heard great things, of course, and they've only done great stuff, and they were fantastic. So Eric, who directed Weird, he and I have known each other for years through the film and television world. And so when he called me, I was like, of course, it'd be great. And, not only great to work together, but it's hard to, how can you say no to a log line, such as that Weird. So, it had its challenges as they all do, but yeah, 100% worth it. So
what were some of the challenges with Weird?
Well, Weird, the biggest one was that we had 18 days to shoot the whole movie.
Oh, wow.
So we, getting into prep, and also we started prep right when Omicron hit. So it was a big question of, a lot of stuff was shutting down at the time again, as we've become accustomed to the last few years. But so when we started talking at the beginning of January, in anticipation of prep, I was like, is this realistic? Are we really going to try to go for it? Because, the last thing you want to do when you have any control is to ramp up and then have to ramp back down and then ramp back up. And I think partially we were fortunate in that sense for having less time, because we kind of just dipped in and out and got it done. But it definitely hit the ground running. So
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
What was the research like for this in terms of figuring out the look? Like, did you guys go back to UHF and all his stuff, or did you look at other comedies? What was the research like?
A little. I think that, the primary thing was just trying to treat it as a high production value biopic that takes itself seriously. So we looked at The Star Is Born and a lot of the Bohemian Rhapsody was another big one. Just a lot of the big, biopics that have happened where if we're treating this like it's a real artist and high production value, you want the visual side especially to take itself seriously, and you see that in the performances too. Is just the more we play it dry, I think the better the comedy hits, and the more fun it is. So that was the goal. It was like, let's just reference stuff that had way more money and way more time than us and see how close we can get.
Was there a scene or something that you guys shot that ended up on the cutting room floor that was really funny, just didn't work for the film, that you kind of wish made it out?
Ooh, I'm trying to remember if there's anything in particular that didn't end up in the movie that was notable. I mean, I feel like in my memory, we've got at least a small piece of everything we did, just because we didn't have a lot of fluff, a lot of extra stuff. There's nothing that comes to mind that we lost. I will say there's a bunch of that we were generally faithful to the script, but given the actors we were working with, and the Eric is very open and works really well with the actors. So there's definitely a lot of moments where we were able to go off script and let them do alts and things like that. And there's a lot of really, really funny stuff in there that, you can only choose one. So there's a lot of that stuff. You never know, might come out down the road, and some alternate scenes and director's cuts and stuff. But yeah, for the most part, I think, we used a higher percentage of what we shot just because we could only shoot so much.
Yeah. Now, jumping to the after party, it's very different from season 1 in terms of the look. So how did you get on the same page with the showrunner and the team to figure out how the season was going to look?
Well, in the beginning, I had actually just, I think when I met with them, I was 4 episodes into watching season 1, because it had just come out when we started talking about season 2. And Carl Hurst, who shot season 1, set a very high bar, and it's like a playground for a DP to be able to kind of navigate between all sorts of different genres. So right off the bat, it's like, this is simultaneously super exciting, but also it's a big responsibility, because there are a lot of opportunities to kind of miss the boat in one direction or the other. And one thing that they mentioned in the beginning was that, well, you learn a lot of stuff going through the process of a first season of any show, and particularly in this case where you're trying so many different things and seeing how far you can push it. And so for them, that was one of kind of the directives was, we've realized that we can push certain things further with the genres. I think they were concerned, like, if we go too far, is it just going to fall apart? And I think what they found once everything comes together, that there were definitely some places they were like, we should have just gone harder. And that's just something I think, you learn through experience. And so, that was a little bit of an icing on the cake in prep, to just be like, let's go as big as we can, to separate these looks from each other. So I was like, all the more, I'm in 100%. So Chris directed the first 2. He did the whole first season, and then so this season was also an adjustment for him to kick it off, but then hand off the reins to a series of directors coming through, which is another challenge in and of itself, where you're trying to dictate that what is the show, and it's not just one template, and in fact most directors came in and you have your present day, and we have kind of the structure and the way the show works, but visually and the way the camera moves and the way it's staged is all unique to the episode. So I think for most of the directors, it was, all the directors, I think they all had a great time being able to come in and throw ideas around and really push, so that was the goal. And we started off great because Chris did 2 of the more ambitious genres in the episode 3 and 9, which was the noir, the detective noir with Travis, and then Elizabeth Isabel in the 3-strip Technicolor Hitchcock vibe. So we kind of hit the ground running that way.
Yeah, well, and that was sort of where I was going with it, because it is so different. So like obviously you didn't shoot 3-strip Technicolor because it'd be incredibly expensive. But like how do you guys achieve that look? Like did you try and get it mostly on set and then do it in color, or did you sort of shoot it more flat and then let the colorist sort of punch it up and make it look like that?
Yeah, the Technicolor one in particular, I mean, we tested a lot before we went into production, and tried to get a sense of where we could push things, what kind of filtration I was going to use in front of the lens, if any, per genre. And then that genre in particular was one where we started talking with Dave, our colorist, right at the beginning. And Dave did all season 1, so he's very tuned into what the show is and wants to be. And so we ran some of the tests by him, and I think we all kind of agreed generally that it was probably the most ambitious one in terms of trying to replicate a chemical process that is, aside from piecing together a new version of a digital camera that shoots 3 different black and white sensors with filters on them and then printing it out, and which I still think would be an interesting experiment. We agreed that there was definitely going to be a level of secondary colors applied to each of the channels and kind of breaking it apart and splitting it. And some of that stuff is more, it's above and beyond what you would do in camera. So we tried to find a LUT that would kind of accommodate our ability to kind of open it up later, but without sacrificing too much of a little bit of that kind of preview that you get on set, to kind of get a sense of where it's going. And so, costume and set design and makeup, everything really kind of played into pushing it in that direction to begin with anyway. So, like the greens that we pushed, a la Vertigo, a lot of that stuff we wanted to, bake in. So we had something to grab onto and take further. Elizabeth's, that kind of powder blue dress was a big element too. So we gave ourselves a good base, and then we're able to kind of do some tests with Dave, and he, would do a couple quick passes. And then we at least had the reassurance that, it can really go further than what we're even seeing on set, which was great. And then I think it just was one of those things that we just had to kind of massage through post and get it to the right spot, which was just taking a lot of references and, saying, okay, we really like this from the Red Shoes, or we really like this from Vertigo, and trying to meet where different contrast levels were and where different color stuff was. Because in my head, you think of Technicolor and you're thinking of these very poppy primary colors. And as I went through Hitchcock stuff to pull references, you can see that, and we get into the 50s and beyond, when the technology was getting better, you can see that kind of like really punchy Technicolor look fade away, which are kind of like, in retrospect, they had something really special. So like North by Northwest and some of those still have a very kind of classic Technicolor look, but it's not as nearly as pushed as like, Wizard of Oz or the Red Shoes or something like that. So again, it was just fun to kind of explore what's been done and where to push what we were making.
So now, I guess one of my questions is, because you mentioned Vertigo, you mentioned a couple of references in there. So what were the references for the season that you guys sort of relied on?
I can go through kind of by genre.
Yeah, sure.
Few kind of that stood out. So like in order, let's see. So rom-com, we I feel like there's kind of just a general vibe you get with Hallmark movies. So that was kind of just a sensibility I thought would be fun to kind of bring to the table. And then Eric, who directed that episode, was leaning on Meet the Parents a lot for the hijinks, and so that was kind of one of the front runners with that. Jane Austen was definitely like the Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice was probably the main one for that. There's the Autumn to Wild Emma movie. I love how that looks, so I pulled some stuff from that visually that I thought looked great. Little Women has some cool stuff in it too. It's all from that, that candlelit kind of motivated daylight and natural motivated stuff. The noir, Double Indemnity, Casablanca, There's a movie I wasn't familiar with prior to researching called T-Men, like T-Men, which I found a bunch of really interesting noir images from. Wes Anderson is there's plenty to go from with Wes Anderson, but we chose to kind of look into the anamorphic version of his stuff, and Tenenbaums and a little bit of Rushmore, but I feel like we were more in the Tenenbaums world. But again, it's like, especially with the Wes Anderson episode, I think one of the goals was just, we're not trying to copy stuff. We're trying to kind of temporarily put our brains in that, in that filmmaking world and say, well, if we're making something new with this mindset, what would you do? So we still had this kind of liberty to treat something as it was versus just saying we need to exactly replicate something. And I think that even though it's a fine line, I think it makes a very big difference, the way we would approach the particular genre. So, it's more of a tribute or an homage versus just a replication, if that makes sense. So, and then what was after that? The Heist. And that was like Ocean's 11, real fun and a lot of movement and, a lot of that kind of like color separation, those kind of cyans and the golds and, and a lot of pace. The episode 6 was the like 90s erotic thriller. So that was like a Basic Instinct. There's a specific sequence in the fridge that we referenced, a sequence from 9.5 Weeks. Body of Evidence. There's some stuff I was looking at with that. 7 was the epic romance, which I was pulling stuff from James Bond movies and anything that's kind of like world travel and big scope. Peter, the director, really wanted to lean into Wong Kar-wai, which I thought was great, which I hadn't done as much work with prior to his arrival. So when Peter came in, we really started looking into those colors and In the Mood for Love, and that turned out to be a big kind of guide for us. Let's see, 8 was the iPhone, the found footage stuff. So that was a little bit less referential. It was more, how far can we push the kind of like, somebody just shot this on their own look. And in an interesting way, you have to pull back on some of those instincts to be like, we were talking about shooting with the Filmic Pro app to give us more latitude and all this stuff, but we found that the functionality of the phone changes a little bit when you shoot that way. So, being able to do like zooms where you're squeezing with your fingers, and the way that kind of it pops between the lenses when you change focal lengths, all those like artifacts were actually really important that we wanted to embrace, those like slight imperfections of shooting that way. So so that was one of those things that was, less of a reference, but more of a like, let's make sure we're shooting this in a way that you would shoot it casually on your own, so it's believable and it doesn't look like we're just trying to fake something. So
I was gonna ask you too, though, is like, you mentioned the challenges of Weird being like a tight schedule. What were some of the challenges on the show Afterparty?
I think the biggest challenge is just in the beginning for sure was just sorting out all the different looks and lenses and making sure everybody was on the same page, so we can, we still have this a television schedule. So you're trying to reference things that are all movies that would have had more time to shoot than what we did. So, being prepared. So we're maximizing our time, but also just, we were doing, we would do a block of 2 episodes generally. And so you have a director that's going, has 2 different looks. Like, let's say Chris, for instance, in the first block, we've got the black and white noir, we've got the Technicolor stuff. Then we're shooting present day stuff. And on any given day, we might shoot each of those looks back to back and then go back to the first one. And so there was a lot of moving around and kind of, it's not just moving gear, changing your lens set, but you're also kind of having to click your mind into a new space, since that's, like the directive, especially with the operators and, Grip Electric too is okay. We're in, we're in the 90s now. We're in heavy steady camera. We're in, using a lot of zooms in shot for the Pride and Prejudice stuff. and then suddenly we're going to something else that's very like we're on a prime. It's very much about a developing camera move where the blocking kind of we work with the blocking and it becomes in essence a oneer as best as possible. And so kind of flipping that switch between genres and with the schedule changes, I think that was probably the biggest challenge overall. But I think it became more and more comfortable, I would say, as we went and in a weird way after that, doing projects where you have just one look or kind of one thing that you're working towards, you're kind of like, oh, this feels pretty straightforward. So
now I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Ooh, I mean, I would say my favorite guilty pleasure films would be in the Christopher Guest world. I'm a big fan of like Best in Show and all that stuff. His stuff is stuff that I will continue to watch for the rest of my life and repeat and enjoy. I would say that's probably my go-to guilty pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Yeah, it's been nice chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.